Literature and music. Deşirme and the Turkmen were both influenced by Iranian civilization's widespread impact on the Seljuk and Ottoman empires. Deşirme by culture, particularly in the literary realm, and Turkmen by Shiism, or religion in general. Turkmen's needs for music and poetry were provided by Ozan, minstrel who combined poetry and music in their performances, a vibrant and creative art versus royal divan literature, criticized for giving precedence to form, monotony, and harmony over the creativity of folk songs and literature. One possible cause of the banning of Ottoman classical elite music following Ataturk's speech at the Turkish Grand National Assembly on November 1st, 1934, may be its historical disconnect from the rural culture. Then comes urbanization in the second half of the 20th century. Pop music replaces millennial folk songs and Ottoman classical music. Arabesque trend, depicting the problems of the lumpen underdog in the transition from peasant to urban status, emerges. Jazz, Western pop music, and classical Western music are preferred by the new Deşirme elite group. As contemporary Turkish pop music matures, it will arguably play a crucial role in the unification of the Republican Deşirme and transforming lumpen. Just as modern Turkish has become our common language of communication, the evolution of a common musical taste will also contribute to a shared identity, perhaps even spreading beyond our borders along with our food culture. It is important to remember that differences in taste are superficial during times of transformation. There are not yet sharp distinctions between the tastes of the elite and the underdog. Provincial genes do make themselves felt on every occasion. That is why folk and oriental dances are the ending schemes of many high society balls and wedding parties. Regarding literature, the book, companion of the lonely man. Verbal culture still predominates in large families, villages, and social neighborhood environments where personal interaction is still vibrant. Hence, there is no time for the book, not even the concept of it. Then comes the urban apartment and the nuclear family, the lonely person of the metropolis where the neighbor does not know his next-door neighbor. Welcome the friend, the book, best friend of the lone urban. In such a process, the book was the best friend in the West for the bourgeoisie, or for aristocrats who had much leisure time. For Turkey, the situation is a little different. Before the book culture was firmly established, came the internet. The internet, together with globalization and the uniforming effect of technology in the global village, has the effect of merging the tastes of the affluent and the rural. Considering the future of traditional Turkish music, dance, and folklore, we can predict that they will unite the Deşirme and the ordinary masses with a uniform taste in the near future. As for internal Orientalism, American military personnel stationed in Ankara in the 1960s created an Oriental corner in their homes with rugs, kilim cushions, hookahs, and copper and brass pitchers. The sons of high-ranking bureaucrats, the youth of 1968, used to copy them and create Oriental corners in their homes. A significant psychological topic. Copying Americans, these kids were declaring to the world, I have risen so high, I have come so far from the village, and now I am very modern. They were shouting, I use village furniture as decor in my home like a Westerner, without worrying about being branded as a peasant. They had become Orientalists of Edward Said without knowing who they were. A similar Orientalist trend was the interest of college youth in rural folk dances. High society kid felt so supreme that he was doing folk dances without the fear of being called peasant or backward. Not to forget, in many a field, they still lacked the self-confidence to assert their real roots. Such was the psychology of many modernizing youth of the 1960s. It may not be an exaggeration if we surmise that future Republican aristocracy may develop from the rising religious class, which would incorporate Ottoman and Anatolian faith and traditional colors into their new lifestyle. No doubt, Western classical music too. With the emerging urban taste, folk dances modernized by the Anatolian Fire Ballet Group may evolve into modern ballet and operas, and likely become global cultural values. The music that will eliminate the distinction between Deşarme and the people and unite them on a common point is modern Turkish pop music. To note, when you hear French, American, Italian, German, Spanish, Indian, Arab, or even Greek pop music, you will immediately figure out the culture it belongs to. Although it has fans from Turkish world to Arab lands to Athens, we still cannot say that Turkish pop has reached maturity and gained its special modern characteristics. It is still in transformation. Maybe we'll have to wait 2 more generations for it to mature. Until that day, both our Deşarme and our Lumpen will sing the same refrains. Regarding how music affects people's souls, while American music stirs the human spirit and creates a new Turkish generation as a rebellious, combative generation, Ottoman classical music is said to be a music that gives peace and tranquility, hence blamed for numbing the warrior spirit of the Turkmen of Central Asia. Now, the question, numbing music or combative music? Quarrel or tranquility? Which one would Ataturk have preferred? The fact is, he always listened to Ottoman classical music. Does America understand that by exporting pop music to other countries, it is fomenting an aggressive global youth? On the one hand, its youth gets aggressive with its music. Then, on the other, they need dope for tranquility, of no use. A vicious cycle of arousing and numbing effects, and a youth in crisis. Education. Errol Gungur writes, "The clash of the education system and socially acceptable moral standards. If what a person learns at home is viewed as a fault at school, and what he learns at school is viewed as a crime in court, then it becomes impossible to know right from wrong and behave morally. Characteristics that humans naturally possess from birth, and those they pick later from their environment, are a serious topic of research among psychologists and philosophers. As dictionaries define it, education is an attempt to shape and mold human nature. And the issue is, in whose mold shall the kid be shaped?" In an age where we discuss the once thought of as futuristic experiments, George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, the most serious question awaiting us is, what shall the education philosophy for the coming age of global cyborgs be? And who shall decide on it? As we may recall, the original goal of public education after the French Revolution was to create a nation for the state. Training bureaucrats for the state was the earlier goal, as was with the Ottoman elite college Enderun. And the final stage was educating human resources for the economy. Starting with Enderun, our priority was always educating bureaucrats for the state, then the nation. Our people did not make the state made the nation, especially the founders of the Republic. Economics calls for analytical, logical, and rational minds. Yet our antiquated, archaic copy of French education philosophy tried to produce ideological, irrational, obsessive minds as rulers deemed correct, a mentality which reached its height during the Nazi and communist eras. With us, the state ideology was named Kemalism, an ideology that pulled everyone to one side to support his political and world views, an ideology that would have surprised Ataturk if he was to rise from his grave. A peasant ideology based on the memorization of Quran, converted into Ataturk's aphorisms without any philosophical conceptualization. Even in universities, parroting aphorisms by professors, politicians, and so-called intellectuals for a lifetime. Fact. In the 21st century, an ideology that leads to a hell of certificated but unthinking idiots. The aim was not to raise questioning, creative minds, but to raise an obeying uniform peasant population to take orders like North Korea. In the beginning, the goal of the new nation-state was understandably to unite the remnant Ottoman Muslims coming in from the Balkans, Caucasus, and Arab lands in one uniform identity and ideology. Yet, the process was unnecessarily extended, corrupted, and even became divisive, nearly leading to the brink of disintegration of the nation. Oppression for uniformity was especially tough on pious Sunnis, Alawites, and Kurds. What the later Deschamets could not realize was that a suit cut for the peasant society of the 1930s, closed to the world like North Korea of today, was too tight for the 93% urban, open society of 21st century. An important example, as government imam schools were under the chapter of technical schools of the legislature, the February 28, 1997 military junta, trying to block imam schools, discouraged all technical schools, results of which Turkish industry still suffers. Today, Turkish industry, whose exports are running towards $500 billion, is like the European post-war industry thirsty for skilled manpower. Rocketing Turkish exports and the industry requiring skilled technical power cannot find enough technicians on the one hand, and unemployment of unskilled university graduates on the other. As our primary, secondary, and high schools, and even our universities, are still trying to raise rote Kemalist mullahs disconnected from real life, Turkish industrialists started opening their own technical training centers, insulated from the indoctrination of outdated official curriculum, focused on industrial production. And how could the peasant, ignorant junta generals know how they were to ruin the Turkish economy with their archaic ideology of Kemalism? To repeat, Kemalism is an irrational, archaic ideology that is impossible to be imposed on a modern bourgeoisie wide open to the global community of the 21st century. Above all, it has nothing to do with Ataturk, as claimed. Further note for those who have seen the modern universities of the Gulf countries will realize with astonishment how far we fall behind the denigrated so-called backward Islamist sheiks with our dogmatic, ideological, rote curriculum. Despite the infrastructure that the government has modernized with the best of intentions, our education philosophy is bankrupt and outdated. It cannot even give national consciousness to many of its graduates, and it can no longer be fixed with patchwork repairs. Let us finish our education chapter by referring to my article dated October 11th, 2017. Revolution in Education: Knowing What You Know Well. Our recently discussed TEOG, or the transition system from basic education to secondary education, is merely a small reflection of our failed educational strategy. Surely, it shall only be a palliative remedy. It is no longer possible to fix education, which is actually bankrupt, out of date, and limping even in raising national consciousness, with patchwork-style repairs, despite the infrastructure that the government has modernized with the best of intentions. We need a holistic approach, radical fundamental solutions to our problems. We need a revolution in our education strategy. For 21st century, we have the world's most arrogant, most cocksure education policy of the world. We claim we can push everything to the student's brain. We end up teaching the least. We rank last among OECD nations. In the age of Google and ChatGPT, we make brains like information garbage cans. We force students to memorize, knowing sure they will forget things within a week. Let's start with the education policy. A bourgeois takes 5 generations to settle. Founding the Republic, we were 90% peasant, 10% literate. Shortly, if my father was the first generation urbanite, I, at 68, am the second, and my kids are third generation urbanites, meaning we are still in the process of urbanization, and my son's grandchildren shall be real bourgeois, transforming from a peasant lifestyle to an urban lifestyle is a painful process with chaotic values. Without new values settling, without a national consensus on the new urban values, it would be impossible to reach a consensus on a national education philosophy. At the present stage, not being ready for a consensus of the Deschamets and the ruralities on the philosophy of education, what we can do is leave long-term vision to politicians and work on the technical aspects of our curriculum. I worked as a high school English teacher. I worked as a lecturer of diplomatic English at the Faculty of Political Sciences of Ankara University. I was astounded and saddened by the lack of English proficiency among senior high school students. Then our first task should be to take English courses as an example. Find out how much the government spends on each student taking English through high school, and then consider what can be done to stop this excessive, pointless, and irrational expenditure. Digested information. Let's elaborate on our subject a little more. In our time, there were, I think, 17 subjects in high school. When the state said that they would put everything into the student's brain, they could not insert anything. The topics that were rushed to be memorized for the exam were forgotten in a few days, and there was no useful, digested information for life. What could be the solution? As far as I can remember, from what I read in my youth, sports were considered important for body discipline and music for soul discipline in ancient Greece. When we add mathematics, Turkish, and history courses to these, 5 main compulsory courses emerge as the skeleton of our curriculum. These main compulsory courses will be taught over and over again, every day for 12 years. Students will digest, learn all the subjects 100%. In other words, the Turkish nation will be a nation that knows well what it knows. The Turkish graduate will do his job perfectly. He will do his best. He will be in the spirit of perfectionist discipline, and he will surpass the Swiss perfection. He will not be indolent to save the day, and certainly be a sportsman, doing his best to work out, for body discipline and health, in the age of screen obesity. Let us now discuss some academic topics. I'm talking about elective subjects. Enthusiasm and talent are our 2 magic words. In addition to the 5 compulsory courses, students will enroll in as many elective courses as their capacity will allow, areas in which they are interested and skilled. Now, when they finish high school and knock on the doors of university, the educators shall see those who have taken only the 5 compulsory courses due to their laziness, and they will see the successful and eager ones who have taken elective additional courses. Here is the caveat. Let's say a kid was good in biology and chemistry courses, the preferred subjects for students planning to pursue a career in medicine. Would it be sufficient to be a medical surgeon? Let us compare a student who has taken carpentry lessons in high school and shown extraordinary dexterity in manual skills. The other student is also successful in chemistry and biology, but inept at physical skills. Indeed, physical skills shall be deciding factors for the medical field. In our suggested system, in addition to the 5 compulsory courses, there can be as many elective courses as the national budget permits. The variation of voluntary subjects can be 50 or 100 if there is sufficient demand. The state ought to prepare teachers in those fields as long as there is demand. With this system, special students who are gifted or incompetent can benefit from the use of special techniques. Turkish people are sacrificing when it comes to education. With Deşarme experience in their vein, Turkish parents want to push their kids among the elite of the nation, and they make great sacrifices for their kids. There are families ready to pay $20,000 to $30,000 for kindergartens, and we do have the know-how to run these schools. Yet the official archaic ideology ties the hands of competent, innovative private schools in breaking with the mesmerizing ideological curriculum into elective courses. If let free from the outdated shackles, the so-called BTWT, national uniformity, these private schools can be centers of excellence. If they were responsible only for teaching the 5 compulsory lessons as we suggested, the remaining time could be perfectly utilized according to each school's own priority, and children without being racehorses, without getting tired. Teacher quality. Now let's come to another technical area. Unfortunately, our teacher quality is very low. Our teachers make very simple pronunciation mistakes. They make very simple grammar mistakes. And these mistakes are also made by university graduates, politicians, even professors, and famous media members. And unaware of their ignorance, they consider themselves elite. We can overcome this problem with technology. Of the 5 compulsory subjects, sports and math are the easiest areas. Since these are universal subjects, they can be taught with the most advanced techniques in the world. These lessons can be prepared by the world's best teachers as audio-visual programs. No teachers will be needed anymore. The teacher will be the instructor, that is, the moderator, who explains the subjects that are not clearly understood and opens the topic of the day to an exciting, innovative discussion. Actually, we already entered this era with ChatGPT and YouTube. Music is second to sports and math for making use of global technology. Yet, the cultural core of the lessons has to be prepared by local pedagogues. And the most challenging subjects to adapt to the universal teaching methodology will be Turkish language and history courses, because they are the most national areas. Regarding the objective of education, as already noted, education has 2 traditional goals: to produce a uniform nation and bureaucracy. Uniformity of nation is still the aim of the majority of states in the world. That is why education is considered national education in many countries. But capitalism forced the national curricula to give priority to producing creative minds for capitalism rather than educating civil servants. Therefore, to stay ahead in global competition, creativity will now be our top priority in education. Another factor is that literacy is no longer the sole means of learning and communication. The deficiency in school curriculum is compensated for by TV and the internet. The best method of learning is curiosity. One learns something he is curious about. That is what sticks in the mind and gets digested. For example, health, which is of secondary value in school curricula, is one of the most watched programs in morning shows on TV channels. With advancements in AI, reading will soon be outdated. Now, voice can turn into text, text into voice. Newspaper articles can be listened to on the internet, and even these can be translated into foreign languages instantly. In short, the era of boasting a state's literacy rates is coming to an end. The speed of materialism. And finally, the clash of the pious versus the laicist. Take the physical law of gravity and the pendulum. We may agitate the pendulum to extremes. Then, it gradually comes to a standstill. Human communities also go to extremes when agitated, especially at times of great transformation. Then, gradually get tired and come to a harmonious tranquility. In the Middle Ages, education was based on religion and spiritual. In modernity, religion was found guilty, and education became material and temporal. Today, especially in countries that have just woken up to the material goods of this world, materialism has not picked up speed yet. Yet, it is on the way to rocket. Kids entering primary school stand on 2 legs: matter and spirit. In a positivist, materialistic curriculum, primary school students are greeted by teachers who are waiting with axes in their hands, and they start chipping the child's spiritual leg. The more the child reads, the more he loses his spiritual leg. If he makes it to graduation from college, his spiritual leg vanishes, rendering him lame. This materialist, one-legged person will turn to yoga studios, psychiatrist offices, and sedatives to treat his future psychological void. Since our nation is going through a transitional period, waking up to the material goods of this world, and in an orgy of consumption, it is natural for the curriculum to support such a lifestyle, and it would be unrealistic to expect a change in education philosophy before this hunger is quenched. Since we are not ready for a sound education philosophy today, we may go for a tactical, expert-based focus on areas where we can make technical progress. Remember that it was not Mozart's genius that made him, but his passion. If we embrace our education philosophy passionately, we can undoubtedly serve our nation well. I was inspired to write these lines by seeing the waste of our country's resources for failed English teaching techniques. A reminder from the days when I was a high school teacher. I hope it will give those who are interested some food for thought. Enderun University. Colleges educating the ruling elite of the USA are called the Ivy League. Graduates of these institutions are like the Ottoman Deşirme, ruling over politically unaware masses like Ottoman Rayaya. Similar to the Seljuks, the Ottomans needed a special institution to educate bureaucrats for the empire. In 1363, Murad I established Enderun. With the conquest of Istanbul, the college was transferred to the new capital. The educational philosophy of the school, which is reflected to the present day and still continues, was to alienate the child from the culture and lifestyle of his family. Not to forget, the Republic is a natural extension of the Ottoman Empire. Bureaucracy, which serves as the cornerstone of the government, is again a direct continuation of the Ottoman bureaucracy. If this is the case, the education of Republican civil servants will be based on the historical philosophy of alienating peasant kids from their roots. In such line, a few universities in Ankara and Istanbul took over the task of producing civil servants for the new state. Just as we attribute the end of the Deşirme class to the 15th of July 2016, we attribute the end of the Deşirme education philosophy to the spread of universities into Anatolia. It is so natural for old professors to oppose provincial universities with various excuses, such as declining quality. You can easily assimilate a kid in an Istanbul or Ankara elite school and alienate him from his rural roots. But when you take the university to the town of the child, you no longer have the chance to assimilate or alienate the kid. Yes, it is difficult to get into elite Deşirme schools. They attract the brightest. True. But then it is individual ambition and soullessness. Provincial schools, on the other hand, are schools that maintain the Anatolian spirit. These schools, with their passionate children and conscious and ambitious philanthropic businessmen, will soon be able to compete with elite schools, and the most successful local colleges will become centers of excellence in their preferred expertise. Foreign Affairs. Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the last bastion of the Ottoman Empire. It is the stronghold of conservative professionalism. Perhaps things should be this way to maintain the state's continuity. Should Turkish foreign policy be revolutionized, or should it be left to evolve? In the age of the speed of light, do we have the luxury of evolution? What is the essence of the Turkish Foreign Service? Should our Ministry of Foreign Affairs be the defensive, reactive, game-breaking institution of the waning Ottoman Empire? Or should it be the offensive, proactive, game-maker, and risk-taking actor of the rising republic? Another question, should it represent the interests of the people or the interests of the state as it did for the Ottoman Empire? How much has it absorbed the culture of the society it belongs to? Should a diplomat perform with a nationalist passion, or should he take a technical, sterile approach? Being non-emotional is an important rule of diplomacy. How much sterility and how much emotion? The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has been the stronghold of Westernism since Tanzimat to the present. The deep roots of its Westernism can best be seen in the articles and comments of retired ambassadors on international issues. They take anti-West policies of politicians with skepticism and caution, assuming that Westerners still have the historical instincts and power to harm Turkey. President Erdogan, representative of the rising Anatolian bourgeoisie, has discarded the late Ottoman defensive diplomacy and launched an aggressive and risk-taking diplomatic initiative for the rising republic. From the reactions of some of our conservative retired ambassadors, this risk-taking initiative is viewed as hasty and dangerous. This concern is understandable. There are also signs that support suspicions regarding the clash of diplomats' views with the offensive, risk-taking policies of politicians. The formation of a parallel diplomacy desk within the presidency and the rise in non-career ambassador appointments are two signs of discord. Another issue is diplomatic organization, whether it should be based on specialization and desk system on the one side and generalized, holistic diplomatic practice on the other. Turkish tradition is for the generalized, holistic outlook on world affairs, using diplomats in incongruent geographies. Given its interests extending from the Turkish world from China to the Islamic world and former Ottoman geography, it is natural for the Turkish diplomat to view the world holistically. Now the question is, should Turkish diplomacy keep its historical, imperial, holistic approach to the world? Or should it choose specialization and desk systems like two other modern empires, USA and Russia? Perhaps the correct question should be, are specialization to depth versus holistic generalization mutually exclusive and incompatible methods for diplomacy? Years ago, when I was the head of the Center for Strategic Research of the Turkish Foreign Ministry, I proposed a middle ground. Due to the frequent rotation of diplomats, institutional memory could not be sustained in the ministry. The same deficiency was relevant for defense and internal affairs ministries. Today, vital crypto evaluation sent by an ambassador to the center is archived and forgotten when diplomats who read it go abroad on another mission. In order to prevent this handicap, I proposed a cell system in which SAM would keep permanent professionals at the headquarters. I think a similar structure to this system was carried out at the presidency. As our Ministry of Foreign Affairs does not have a desk and expertise system, we still do not have specialist experts in vital areas. We have deficiencies in Greek, Arabic, Russian, Persian, and Chinese languages. To overcome these deficiencies, we can think of establishing an academy at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in cooperation with a university in Ankara. Such an institution can establish a master's program in cooperation with the academic community, and even train foreign diplomats like the Russians are doing. Years back, I visited the Russian Foreign Ministry Institution in Moscow. I was told that they were teaching 40 foreign languages, if my memory is correct, to their diplomats, as well as to guest diplomats from friendly countries. To sum up, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is experiencing problems with its current staff shortage, insufficient office space, and historical structure, and not in a position to synchronize with the speed of Recep Tayyip Erdogan's foreign policy. Time will tell how the transformation will evolve. Business. Since there was no aristocracy to serve as an example for them, provincial notables and entrepreneurs of the early republic looked at westernized and modernized Descharmes bureaucrats. Cooperation with bureaucracy was also good for their commercial interests, and in time, the organic bond between today's Istanbul's big capital, military, civilian, high bureaucracy, and their natural representative CHP was established. And in Republican history, we saw the most striking examples of this organic bond in the collaboration of Istanbul business, its media power, and junta generals in military coups. Let us also touch upon the external links of this collaboration. When I was the Consul General of Turkey in Bregenz, Austria, I had hosted the mayor of Kayseri, Mehmet Osazeki, who came to buy cable cars for Mount Archies. During our conversation, I remember saying to him, the grocer accumulating a little capital in the village goes to the town. The merchant who blooms in town moves to the city. The businessman who grows up in the city goes to the metropolis. And the big businessman who grows up there opens to global commerce. We may surmise a business to go abroad may have a volume of $500,000 as a beginning capital. Once capital becomes globalized, it parts ways with the government, which has helped it flourish, and goes into the hierarchy of the international business community. The purpose of this anecdote is that, as Ataturk warned, some politicians, juntas, and businesses may sync their interests with those of foreign interests. Especially once growing to transnational size, companies start becoming cosmopolitan, and their commercial interests start overwhelming their national loyalty. And just like the prostitutes we talked about, some businesses may go against the interests of their own nation. We saw grave examples of it on the 28th of February, 1997, 15th of July, 2016, and other coups. That is what we have to be alert about. Here is an intelligence issue. When national intelligence services collect vital industrial and economic intelligence, they have to give it to their industrialists and merchants to compete with foreigners. Which companies? How to maintain justice in distribution. One last point. Ottoman Deşirme, especially the ulema clergy class, have historical fame for their istemizuk, a certain no for any novelty. It was against creativity and change, fearing that it would harm stability and predictability. Despite all their Westernist rhetoric, the Republican Deşirmes, by saying no to every investment for the country, are proving that they indeed are the successors of Ottoman Deşirmes. Interestingly, though, is Istanbul's big capital's dilemma. Historically, they are in bed with CHP, who are against change and creativity, and it is illogical for capital to be against innovation and investment. Time will tell how they will solve this issue. Logic says they will lock interests with the emerging Anatolian business. Corporatism. Corporatism is a tool of fascism. Through the establishment of professional organizations and chambers, the fascist state maintains control over professional and business groups. The corporatist project is a very fascinating area of research for our nation. Yes, the state wanted and founded the professional chambers and associations to control business and professional chambers. When democracy came, they continued functioning. One thinks that they would be against the Deşirmes. Yet, we should remember that business and the educated were traditionally in bed with Deşirme bureaucracy. So when people's rule came, they stayed with the Deşirme interests and against the governments that represented the periphery. It is only natural that today's professional chambers, who got their start on the basis of this stance, are pro-CHP. And finally, Ataturk. Legitimacy is the first concept that comes to mind when the state is mentioned. When we consider where legitimacy comes from, the pharaoh declares, "I am God," and his legitimacy is within himself. With ancient Turks, legitimacy was given by Gök Tengri, sky god, to Turkish Khagans. After Islam, sultans declared themselves to be God's shadow on earth. Then we see the age of charismatic leaders with legitimacy again in themselves. The point where global civilization is, legitimacy is given only by the people. Conversely, totalitarian Deşirme, like his Ottoman forebears, continues to undervalue and oppose the populace. He views the populace as being ignorant, bigoted, and reactionary, and does not believe in receiving their democratic approval. What should the putschist junta members of the Republic do in this picture? The Sultan received his legitimacy from God. They do not believe in getting legitimacy from the ignorant masses. Then how do we base their legitimacy? Ataturk. Since the putschist peasant generals did not yet know what democracy was, like sultans getting legitimacy from God, they continue to base their legitimacy on a deity, this time Ataturk, and not on the people, and thus continued the Ottoman shadow game, which they allegedly said they were against. And the Western world. As the putschists were laicist and Westernist, the West had to support them against ignorant, regressive Turks. See what psychiatrist Kan Arslanoglu says about leadership in Freud's totem and taboo pattern. Leader worship is an inherited habit from the tribal order. The leader is God's spokesman, practitioner, even himself. All positive qualities belong to him. All beauty comes from him. The human need to find and worship a leader is almost instinctive. With the increase in intelligence and education level, this need decreases somewhat, but the majority still feels the need for worship. In oppressive systems, leaders become more prominent and worship increases. The situation is both the result and the cause of the feeling of obedience to authority. People want an authority, and when they find it, they start worshiping it. The leader is imitated in every way. The reasoning method of the leader becomes the reasoning method of the society or the group. If the leader is liberal, everyone becomes liberal. If the leader is paranoid, everyone gets paranoid. Even the mimics and gestures of the leader get imitated. Millions of cartoons of the leader are produced. People identify with the leader. Qualities and power they lack, they find in the leader, feeling them in themselves. A fitting description of the putschist. He uses Ataturk as a source of legitimacy. He even imitates Ataturk in his dress. He terrorizes people by using Ataturk as a stick against the people. Law of protection of Ataturk is made for this purpose. Today, if an innocent 8-year-old primary school student says something against Ataturk, not only him, but his whole family and his teacher shall pay for the offense. A fact. In the 21st century, a lifetime of trauma and terror will be inflicted upon the innocent child. Ataturk's vision of a free society with free thought, a free conscience, and free knowledge cannot be realized under such a terror regime. A brain that has been shaped by repetition and fear cannot be free and creative, read critical philosophy, or expand its horizons. Above all, this pedagogy is what makes the shortage of great thinkers in the Republic. And the deeper effect of distorting Ataturk is that he is used for opiating the Turkish nation. Marx says religion is opium. Our Deschamets use Ataturk as a faith, an opium, to stupefy people. Nietzsche notes that communities, in time, attribute divinity to their ancestors who have protected them from monsters and threats. He even extends the origins of the gods to the idea of their rescuing society from its fears, highlighting their debt to the gods and ancestors that their society would never be able to pay their debts to them. Same with Deschamets. In the subconscious of the Deschamets, Kemalism is not a matter of logic. It is a matter of faith. It is a spiritual, unquestionable gospel of faith. Anyone who dares question it is excommunicated by the Deschamets and informed to the police for a criminal suit. Joke? Real. 21st century reality of Turkey. And what does Ataturk want? No dogmas. Let's go in this vein. Some claim that while the Quran is an outdated text written 1400 years ago and cannot be applied today, they excommunicate anyone who would make similar assertions against Ataturk's 100-year-old words. For them, Ataturk's words and deeds are eternal and cannot be questioned or altered. Let's remember the 28th of February junta also had a truth, and their ideology was to last for 1,000 years. No joke. And the Western democracies bolster these autocrats with full support and encouragement against their ignorant people. Whether viewed positively or negatively, Ataturk is the reality of Turkey. Even though it has been almost a century since his death, he is still Turkey's agenda. Why is this so? This question is difficult to answer. There is almost no individual psychological and socio-psychological, historical, objective academic research on the fanatical love, hate of Ataturk in Turkish society. Because Ataturk is not history yet, he is a living element of Turkish politics. No research has yet been conducted on Ataturk's deification using sterile, scientific techniques. Our academics do not dare to enter this field yet. In reality, this fear is unfounded because the subject is not Ataturk. The issue is why, how, and for what purposes he was made a center of faith by Deschamets who are still not aware of the fact that Ataturk was the very person who pulled their rope by deposing their head, the Sultan. No psychiatrist has yet studied the behavior of millions on why they put not 1, not 5, but 10 Ataturk pictures in their homes and workplaces, or why they put Ataturk's signature on all the windows of their cars. The issue is not Ataturk, but with the psychological and political needs he was deified. As we said above, the first reason is that the peasant juntas who do not yet know what democracy is show him as a source of legitimacy. As for Ataturk's belief, I think a person's most sincere feelings are seen in the death of his mother. The following lines in this Sun's article with the phrase Allah on the death of his mother seemed sincere. Chief Adjutant Saleh Bey had reported the death of Zubaydi Hanim by telegram. He immediately replied, "I am very saddened by the sorrowful news you gave me. Have the deceased be put to rest in the appropriate ceremony. May Allah grant life and peace to the nation." As for the love-hate approach to Ataturk, religion, when personal, is a matter of faith. Yet, for statesmen, it is a political, strategic tool. In that respect, Ataturk's faith is beyond our subject. Only he and Allah can know it. It is up to us to pray for his soul. Let's wake up to reality. The peasant society of the 1940s is left behind in the depths of history. 21st century Turkey is 93% urban. Ataturk's use as a source of political legitimacy in Turkey has expired. The one who will rule Turkey now has only one chance: to seek the source of legitimacy in the people and the values of Anatolia. As long as we insist on basing political legitimacy on Ataturk, we will not be able to pass to democracy. Ataturk's populist discourses. Now, in order to understand Ataturk correctly, let's record some of his views. For hundreds of years, the Turkish Empire was a complex mass of people, with the Turks in the minority. We had other so-called minorities, and their management was the source of most of our troubles. The old idea of conquest and its minorities. One reason for Turkey's decline was that it had exhausted itself over the exceedingly difficult question of governance. 13th July, 1923. The youth of our generation was dominated by Ottomanism's indoctrination and influence. Non-Turkish elements of the empire were given special importance over Turks, the real owners and founders of the state. With a wrong understanding of religion, Arabs were called Kavim-i-Nasib, noble race. Albanians, occupying important places in the palace, the military, and administration, had a special praise, and the Turks were viewed as unimportant secondary masses in the background. 1931. We see conquests and magnificent movements in Ottoman history. This is the strategy of conquest in ruling the entire planet. Yet, these conquests and magnificent movements never gave the Turks, founders of the state and realizers of these conquests, what they wished, nor served their interests. 22nd of January, 1923. Yes, we had vast borders and a magnificent empire within those borders. However, the vast majority of people living within that boundless space were never in praise of the essential component, Turk, or perhaps against them. The small group of Turks had to disperse over wide realms and use force to protect the borders and these peoples. 22nd of January, 1923. Friends, those who have ruined this country and this nation for centuries are long dead. All youth must believe in it. We shall never let them return unless our heads are gone, until our blood is shed. September 19th, 1924. This army belonged to the Sultan, served his will, and got orders only from him. This army had to yell, "Long live my Sultan," 3 times a day. We built our new army on entirely new ideas and principles. Our new army is built from among our hard-working peasants and members of the former army who were dedicated to the defense of the motherland and the cause of our people. Establishing our new army, we had only one objective in mind, and that was, this army would be the army of the people, not Sultan's army, representing the interests of the entire people, not just of specific individuals. 4th of January, 1922. How else can it be expressed that Ataturk was on the side of the Turkmen against the Sultan and the Deşirme? The conclusion we have reached about Mustafa Kemal Ataturk is that he desired to awaken those who had spent 1,000 years living for the afterlife to this temporal world and make them citizens. He had a sincere desire for it. He aimed for a shocking, extreme effect. He appears to have discovered what is reasonable, given the dire conditions of his time. Unfortunately, Due to the lack of social and economic infrastructure, he was unable to turn the countryside of the 1930s positivist. As we mentioned above, it took a century for his dreams to come true, thanks to the socio-economic revolutions of Presidents Özal and Erdogan.